This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Robert, Kathryn, and I are talking about tropes. Oft used, oft misunderstood, the word at least. So let's define it. Trope, a noun, is a figurative or metaphorical use of a word or expression. It's also a significant or recurrent theme, a motif. So if you Google trope, which I did, and literary trope, you see a lot of definitions like it refers to a type of figure of speech, theme, image, character, plot, literary device, metaphor, hyperbole, irony, and that is not what I mean when I say trope. What I mean is the dictionary's second definition here of a significant or recurrent theme, a motif. Yeah. So it can be an image or an object, a prop in your story, or some kind of reference point that may be metaphorical or ironic or hyperbolic. But key to trope, no matter where you look up your definition, is that it is recurrent throughout the story. So it can't be a one-off or a one or two off. So do you guys agree with that? Want to add anything to our definition, our working definition of trope here?
No, I think that's pretty reasonable. I mean, it's a very expansive topic, and one that is banded around. It's probably a trope in and of itself, actually.
Yeah, or at least a meme.
Yes. That's a whole show in and of itself, isn't it? Is a trope a meme?
Oh, gosh.
Kathryn's head just exploded.
Well, the original idea of meme, which who was it? No, okay, it's gone. I did look at that once because I came across meme decades ago because it's the smallest communicatable element of a particular idea, and that's what meme is. So these days we think of memes as silly pictures or GIFs on the internet with some words. Which is not really a meme, but you can understand why they came to become called that. But the idea of a meme essentially is something like, for example, when someone invented the wheel, then they would have just used that, wheeled their cart or whatever it was, pulling it past somebody else, and somebody else would have looked at that and immediately grasped the concept. There was no need to explain it, and that's the whole idea of a meme, is it's the smallest communicatable element. And I tend to think of tropes as a little bit like that, as, that when you come across it, it's immediately identifiable in a way. If you're analysing the work, I'm not necessarily saying that you think of that when you're creating the work. And definitely misused. I mean, there are some people who think tropes are all bad, and there are some people who think that tropes is all about what you do when you write it to market. And then if you've ever looked at it, tvtropes.com is just an unbelievable resource, and if you go there, you'll never come out.
Right. Well,
black hole of TV tropes.
Yeah, I like what you just said about some people think it is, because we can clear up some of that confusion here. A trope, when you're writing, is simply a literary device, something you work into your story that appears several times over the course of the story. So if your character has a family portrait hanging over the piano, and let's say, the father figure is kind of the villain of your character's backstory who's overshadowing your protagonist's life and making it hard for her to function or something, you might show the reader that portrait with the father figure prominent in it 4 or 5 times over the course of the book whenever you are highlighting your protagonist's difficulty functioning because of this relationship in the past, right? And at the very end, you might do something with it, like she slams a door and the picture falls off the wall and the glass breaks. you know?
Yep.
So that family portrait is the trope. It's the object that is metaphorically standing in for her relationship with her father that's haunting her throughout this story.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. And I think it's the skill of the writer that determines whether that particular example then is either read as a cliche or becomes an invisible part of the book and you don't really notice it.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's the difference between, that's what tips people over the edge when they say, oh, tropes, you know, it's just a lazy way to write a book and or a film or whatever. But, you know, everything around us is full of them and they're part of our cultural stamp.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not going to avoid it. And I think some genres demand particular tropes anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get away with it. You know, it's just one of those things, like romance requiring the happy ever after or the happy for now. You know, it's in mainstream terms. And what stops that from falling into cliche or something that's hard to read is the skill of the writer.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it is all about the skill of the writer at the end of the day, because a trope should be a very small thing that is unique to your story and is used artfully and that recurs over the course of the story. So it's not just dealing with an expected element like a, thriller is going to have high-speed chases and explosions. Those are not tropes. Those are just plot elements that we expect in that genre. They're genre conventions, not tropes. And
I think that gets used a lot.
Uh-huh.
Like, I think I would have gone that direction had you not defined it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is interesting. Why is that? Do you think?
Well, because I think there's an overlap, and so some genre conventions are tropes, but not all genre conventions are tropes.
Or can be tropes. Some genre, yeah.
I would disagree there. I think that is conflating the terms,
Yeah.
Because the trope is that recurrent thing that symbolizes something specific to the reader about this story. And if it's specific to this story and these characters, it's not going to be a genre convention. Like, okay, let's say your genre convention is that you've got, a cop or a detective character who's a man, and he's got a psychological wound from his past that's related to, his mother. So he's got to resolve that issue. It drives him to, fight crime as a detective. That would be the genre convention, that your character has a dark past and a wound related to his family, primarily the mother. The trope would be something you as a writer should artfully make unique to your story and your character that could symbolize that genre convention. So maybe our detective keeps his mother's rosary folded up in his wallet, or, has it pinned over his bed or whatever. So whenever you show the reader that trope, that object, it symbolizes his relationship with his mother and the pain of his past.
Okay.
Does that clarify
That's another,
the difference?
It's just a different angle on it. Yeah, I think it's going to be hotly debated because of the fact that tropes is such an encompassing term, has, as you say, has come to mean lots of different things. So, yeah, based on just just that secondary dictionary definition, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, interesting. So when we talk about the dictionary definition and talk about like motifs, it said the word motifs in there.
Yeah.
And so I have a musician background and I play piano. And so when I think motif, I think of maybe let's say a 4-bar melody that happens over and over and over again. So would you think of a trope as like maybe a part of a scene or an action or something that the character repeats over and over and over again that could, that takes us into different things rather than just a symbol? Because like a lot of those things,
but what do you mean by by takes us into different things.
Well, I mean, like in music, again, you're gonna see it like at the, like, let's say the top of the piece, the middle of the piece, and then into the second movement, and then maybe you see it again at the end of the second movement, and then you see, so like you'll see it at different times. It kind of recalls, oh yeah,
Yes.
this is what this piece is, but then you move into something different,
Yeah.
and then you kind of forget about it, and then when it comes back, you kind of, as a listener, go, oh yeah, there's that,
Right.
musical pattern again, or that melody that,
Right.
catch it.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. I like the word you use there, recalls, that it recalls something else. That's very true because, your literary trope, let's say you've got a post-apocalyptic world where a dictator figure has risen to power. And so now everywhere your characters go, they are seeing posters with the dictator's head on it. So that poster, that image becomes the trope. And when you see it, it recalls something else, like loss of freedom, like dictatorship, like, lack of power. So it's the thing that stands in symbolically to bring something else to the reader's mind in a kind of shorthand.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
and it could be positive or negative, though I'm picking all negative examples here.
Well, like
No,
the red shirts in Star Trek,
Mm-hmm.
you just
Oh,
you
yeah,
just,
Yeah.
you just know that if they've got a red shirt on, they're not an important character.
Mm-hmm. And they're doomed.
They may be doomed. Yeah, and I like. Have you ever watched Galaxy Quest?
No.
Oh, you've got to watch it. You've got to watch it. Only if you've ever, been a Star Trek fan. But one of the characters in there he comes in. He's part of the main. It's Sam Rockwell. So he's played by a decent actor, and he's saying, "Well, look at me. Look, I'm not wearing a shirt the same color as any other week. I'm wearing a red shirt. And come on, what's my name? You tell me. What's my name? What's my name? Do you know my name?" And they will go, "You're the security guard." "Yeah, exactly. I'm just a security guard, and I'm wearing a red shirt. I'm gonna die, man. I'm gonna die," because it's a satire, about. So it's using a trope to be humorous, which is quite interesting.
But does it recur? Because that's key to the definition. Like,
It does. Yeah.
So in
is
Galaxy
it like-
Quest, the red shirt idea recurs.
Yeah.
Cool.
And in fact, at the end, one of the spoiler alert, at the end, he gains a name.
Oh, so he doesn't die.
That's right.
Nice.
It's quite funny.
Uh-huh.
So I'm wondering if maybe the negativity around tropes, one, comes from a misunderstanding of what exactly a trope is. We kind of conflate it with a bunch of other things. But two would come from like taking a trope that you saw in another piece of literature and literally just pulling it so that you take the exact same symbol for the exact same meaning, and then just layering it into your story, and that's where it becomes cliche, and that's where it becomes something where people go, oh, not this again, with the tropes.
Right. I mean, that could certainly make something that started as a trope a cliche if it's being overused that way. The other, like the first definition is it's a figurative or metaphorical use of a word or expression. So when you look it up online, there's a lot of kind of confusion about, it could be hyperbole, it could be a metaphor, it could be a this, it could be a that. Well, yes, but the thing we want to focus on as writers is that it's that motif, that significant or recurrent theme. It must appear multiple times over the course of the story, and its meaning is the same each time it occurs. And let's go back to Kathryn's word, recalls. So it does take the reader somewhere else. If the reader thinks about it, you might just go somewhere else subconsciously. So, the detective pulls a bill out of his wallet and the author shows the reader some of the rosary beads. The detective might not even notice the rosary. He's blind to it because it just lives there. But the reader says, oh, mom is significant in this moment somehow. His past is significant now. So that's how the trope functions. Even if your character's not thinking about it or aware of it in the moment, the author is showing it to the reader.
Yeah, and my argument about the genre conventions is it's those type of touches that reassure the reader that they're reading the book that they thought they were buying. Yeah, and so
reinforce genre conventions.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are tropes within. Again, I'll go to sci-fi because I lean heavily on it. But it's very hard to write a space opera without space, for example, and that's something that's going to recur, and you have to attend to every now and then. Even if it's a highly character-driven, intense plot, you've still got to show your hand on a regular basis with, where are they in space? How do they travel? What do their spaceships look like? The reader expects it. And so to me, I that's where I blend in tropes and genre conventions.
Right, but space is setting, and that's not a theme or a motif. That's just part of your world building.
Why is that a theme or a motif?
Because it's setting. Because it's your world. You are in space, but so the convention might be that your space opera hero, I don't know, what's a convention is like Han Solo. So the trope would be if every space jockey, cocky male pilot wore the chain of bullets across his chest or whatever that strap is over his chest. That would be the trope, because then readers would associate that with that character. It's the symbol that stands in, that recalls something else, that recurs, and so it could support the genre convention, but you could also focus on your story having tropes that are unique to your characters and to your world.
Yeah, I don't disagree that some of them are unique to the story, for sure. And I like the idea that you can embed those within it without a heavy hand, so that it becomes a richer part of your story, as opposed to just throw away things. Yeah, for sure.
Right. Other thoughts on tropes? Other questions we need to debate hotly?
Or not hotly.
Well, yeah, I mean, no matter what your definition of it, the heavy-handedness is probably one of the big issues, I think. And maybe one of the reasons, if we look down the path of the relatively new business of self-publishing, where a lot of people haven't, until more recently, had the exposure to a literary editor who's had decades of experience in the marketplace. I think that it's probably a good education to give yourself in terms of, am I being too heavy-handed in some of the tropes, especially for those who are following a particular right-to-market approach. I'm sounding critical, and I don't mean to be. I'm trying to think of an example where when you're getting a book out at a great speed, as opposed to taking, say, a year going between editors and refinements, etc., then it could be easy to lean on cliche too heavily. And right. So, my word of advice would be tropes to be to err on the side of being light.
Right.
Right. And this is where, like, we were talking about how certain tropes can become cliches, like with red shirts as a shorthand. And I think that just taking the trope and pulling it just so that you have shorthand so you can lay it in there and be done and move on from whatever it is that you're writing is where the danger is in a lot of that, oh, well, this is familiar. The reader's going to like this because this is a touchstone that they know, is familiar, and the genre uses it over and over and over and over again. Like, you don't need to use the same symbol as everyone else to convey the same meaning. So that, again, like you said, it's about taking care with what it is that you're putting in there, what you're taking from other things in your genre, and being aware of what are the things that are, more like genre conventions, like the scenes or chapters or, like a plot events that you kind of want to get in there versus the little symbols that you don't need to take from anybody else because you can layer in something unique to your story.
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, I suppose like the possibility you fall into that stereotypical antagonist, the moustache twirling, cackling demon. That would be probably an example of a cliche trope, I guess, where it'd be easy to do that because that's what you, as a newbie writer, I know that's sort of I'll make the guy wear a cloak because people instantly recognize that as a that's obviously the the villain.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. So at the end of the day, be unique, be specific, be artful. Tropes are small things that cue the reader to think of some important element of your story, typically thematic content, like that relationship that's haunting your character or whatever. So, so be artful, not cliche. And
that's right.
Yeah, there we go. All right, that's it for this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.